I'm ashamed. The rancher lifted the lantern, discovered the hidden truth. Wild West. The night was dark and quiet on the ranch. Joshua Bennett stood in the doorway of the barn, the cool evening breeze brushing against his face. The light from his lantern flickered, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. The stars above were hidden behind thick clouds, and there wasn't a sound in the air except for the occasional rustling of the wind through the tall grasses. Joshua had always loved the quiet of the night, but tonight was different. Tonight, something felt off. He had spent the day working the land, like he did every day, but his mind kept going back to something that had happened earlier. His brother Samuel had acted strangely. It wasn't like Samuel to keep secrets, but Joshua had noticed him sneaking around, always looking over his shoulder as if afraid someone would see him. The two brothers had been raised on this ranch, taught by their father to always be honest and work hard. Joshua trusted Samuel more than anyone else in the world, but tonight, that trust was being tested. There was something Samuel wasn't telling him, and Joshua had a feeling it had something to do with the barn. With a deep breath, Joshua stepped inside. The barn was silent, save for the quiet shuffle of hooves from the horses in their stalls. Everything was where it should be. Nothing seemed out of place. But then his eyes fell on the far corner of the barn, where a small pile of hay lay against the wall. Something was hidden there, and Joshua's heart skipped a beat. Slowly he approached the pile of hay, the light from his lantern illuminating the dark corners of the barn. He could feel the tension in the air, like the barn itself was holding its breath. His hand trembled slightly as he reached down to move the hay aside. Beneath it, he found something that didn't belong. It was an old, leather-bound journal, its pages worn and yellowed with age. Joshua's fingers brushed over the cover, and a strange chill ran down his spine. This wasn't just any journal. It was something from the past, something that had been hidden away for a reason. He picked it up, his curiosity growing stronger with each passing second. The lantern's light reflected off the worn edges of the book, and Joshua could feel the weight of it in his hands. He glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to be watching him, but the barn was empty, and the only sound was the beating of his own heart. Joshua's mind raced. Why was this journal hidden here? Why had Samuel kept it a secret? He had to know what was inside. Slowly he opened the cover and began to flip through the pages. The handwriting was old, and the ink was faded, but the words were clear. The first entry was dated many years ago, long before Joshua and Samuel were born. The words spoke of a promise, a deal made between two men. One of them was a landowner, a powerful man in the area. The other was a member of Joshua's family, a man whose name was unfamiliar to him. As Joshua read the entry, he realized that the promise wasn't just about land or wealth. It was about something far more dangerous. The next pages were filled with more details, cryptic messages about an agreement that had been sealed with blood. The family name was mentioned, and Joshua felt a lump form in his throat. The more he read, the more the unease inside him grew. This wasn't just a family history. It was a hidden truth, one that could change everything. Why didn't Samuel tell me about this? Joshua whispered to himself, his voice breaking the silence of the barn. Why keep something like this hidden? His mind raced as he closed the journal, holding it tightly in his hands. He couldn't understand it. Why had Samuel kept this secret for so long, and what was this hidden truth that was buried in the past? Joshua felt a mix of anger and confusion swirling inside him. He had always trusted Samuel, always believed that his brother would never keep anything from him. But now, with the journal in his hands, Joshua realized that there was much more to their family's history than he had ever known. Without thinking, Joshua stepped out of the barn and into the night, his lantern swinging gently at his side. The air was cool against his skin, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside him. He had to find Samuel. He had to know the truth. As he walked across the dusty ground toward the house, his mind kept going back to the journal. What was the secret that Samuel had been hiding? What was the deal that had been made so many years ago? And why had his brother kept it from him? When he reached the porch, Joshua stopped. He could see Samuel inside, sitting by the fireplace, his back to the door. The flickering light of the fire illuminated Samuel's face, but his expression was unreadable. Joshua took a deep breath and stepped inside. "Samuel," Joshua said, his voice low but firm, "we need to talk." Samuel looked up, his eyes widening when he saw the journal in Joshua's hand. His face went pale and he quickly stood up, his hands trembling. "Where did you find that?" he asked, his voice tight. Joshua didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the table and set the journal down in front of Samuel. "Why didn't you tell me?" Joshua asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is this? What have you been hiding from me?" Samuel looked down at the journal, his face a mix of guilt and regret. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence in the room was thick, heavy with the weight of the secret that had been buried for so long. Finally, Samuel took a deep breath. "It's not something you should know," he said quietly. "Not yet. It's a part of our family's past that we can't change, and if the truth comes out, it could ruin everything." Joshua's heart sank. He had always trusted Samuel, but now he wasn't sure what to think. The journal, the secret, the hidden truth, it was all too much to process in one moment. "Tell me," Joshua said, his voice stronger now. "Tell me what's going on. I deserve to know." Samuel hesitated, looking down at the journal with a troubled expression. Finally, he nodded slowly, as if coming to some kind of decision. "You're right," he said softly. "You deserve to know the truth, but be warned, Joshua. Once you hear it, there's no going back." And with those words, the truth began to unravel, as old as the land itself and just as unforgiving. The night stretched on, and the fire crackled quietly between them. The journal lay on the table, still open to the page Joshua had left behind. Samuel sat across from him, his face pale and his eyes darting nervously toward the journal. It was clear he had not expected his brother to uncover the truth so soon. Joshua's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What had Samuel meant by the truth? What could be so dangerous that Samuel had kept it hidden for so long? He looked at his brother, trying to read his face, but there was nothing but guilt and hesitation. "I've waited too long to tell you," Samuel finally spoke, his voice low and almost apologetic. "But there's a reason, Joshua." "There's always been a reason." Joshua leaned forward, his voice firm. "I don't care about reasons right now, Samuel. I just want the truth. Everything. All of it." "Why didn't you tell me?" Samuel closed his eyes briefly, taking a deep breath before meeting his brother's gaze. "Because it's not just our family's secret. It involves others. People who are still alive. People who might come after us if they find out we know too much. What I'm about to tell you could change everything." Joshua's heart raced. He had never seen Samuel so serious before. This was more than just a family matter. It was something far bigger, something dangerous. Samuel's next words only confirmed that. "When I was young," Samuel began, his voice shaking slightly, "I found out about a deal our grandfather made. A deal with a man named Victor Donovan, a landowner, a man of power. He wasn't just any man, though. He was part of a secret organization, one that had been operating in the shadows for decades." Joshua's confusion grew. "What kind of organization?" "A powerful one," Samuel continued, "one that controlled a lot of the land and resources around here. They called themselves the Vanguard, a group that believed in keeping power for themselves. They didn't care about right or wrong, only about control. They struck deals with people, using fear and manipulation to get what they wanted." Joshua's thoughts raced, trying to piece it all together. "So, our grandfather made a deal with these people? What kind of deal?" Samuel hesitated, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his shirt. "It wasn't just a simple land deal, Joshua. It was something much darker. Our grandfather agreed to hand over the ranch to them in exchange for something they promised him: protection. They promised they would keep our family safe, but only as long as we kept the secret." Joshua's mind spun. "Protection? From what?" "From enemies," Samuel said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Enemies that were far more dangerous than anything we could have imagined. The Vanguard wasn't just a landholding organization. They were involved in things that were better left in the dark. Things that would ruin the ranch and the family name if anyone found out. I couldn't tell you because I didn't want you to carry that burden." The room seemed to close in around Joshua. He had always believed that the ranch, the land, and their family's legacy were built on hard work and honesty. But this was something else entirely. He looked down at the journal, the pages filled with cryptic messages about promises and deals made long ago. "So what does that mean for us now?" Joshua asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "It means the land isn't just ours," Samuel replied, his voice barely audible. "The Vanguard still has a claim on it. They'd been watching us, waiting for the right time to step in. They'd been biding their time, knowing that one day we would learn the truth." Joshua's heart pounded in his chest. "So all this time we've been living under their thumb?" "Yes, but there's more, Joshua. The deal had a price, and our family has been paying it ever since." "What price?" Joshua demanded, unable to hold back his anger. "What price have we been paying?" Samuel hesitated, the guilt in his eyes deepening. "It's not just about the ranch. Our family's bloodline, it's been marked. You see, the Vanguard, they believe in something called the blood bond. They believe that each generation of our family owes them something more than just land or money. They've been watching, making sure we fulfill our end of the bargain." Joshua's head swam with confusion. "What do you mean by the blood bond?" "It's..." Samuel paused, struggling to find the right words. "It's something that ties us to them, something that keeps us bound to their will. The deal our grandfather made wasn't just for land, it was for something else. A promise of loyalty. And when the time comes, when the Vanguard demands it, our family has to give them what they want." Joshua felt a chill run down his spine. "What do they want, Samuel?" "They want our loyalty, Joshua. They want control. And one day they may ask for something else, something no one should have to give." The silence in the room was deafening. Joshua's thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of everything Samuel had just revealed. The Vanguard. The blood bond. The control. It was all too much to absorb in one sitting. "Why didn't you tell me?" Joshua asked again, his voice barely a whisper. "Why keep it from me?" "I didn't want to drag you into it," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've worked so hard to keep the ranch running. I didn't want you to lose everything because of something that happened before we were even born. I thought maybe we could outrun it." Joshua shook his head. "But we can't outrun it, can we?" Samuel looked down, the weight of the truth heavy on his shoulders. "No, we can't." "And now the Vanguard knows that we found out. They'll come for us. They'll come for the ranch." Joshua stood up, pacing across the room. His mind was racing, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, but the picture was more terrifying than anything he had ever imagined. "They've been waiting for this," Joshua muttered. "They've been watching us all along, waiting for the moment when we would learn the truth." "I'm sorry, Joshua," Samuel said quietly, his voice breaking. "I never wanted this for you. We can't let them take everything. We have to fight." "But we don't even know who they really are," Samuel said, shaking his head. "The Vanguard is powerful. They have connections everywhere." "We'll find a way," Joshua said, determination flooding his chest. "We can't run anymore. It's time to fight for what's ours." And as the fire crackled in the hearth, the two brothers knew that the future of the ranch and their very lives would never be the same. The morning sun had just begun to rise over the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch. The air was still cool from the night, but there was a growing heat in Joshua's chest that he couldn't ignore. The truth had come to light, but the weight of it felt unbearable. He walked slowly across the land he had always called home, his mind racing with questions and the overwhelming need to act. Samuel had not slept much that night. The weight of his confession had been too much, and Joshua could tell by the look in his eyes that he regretted not telling him sooner. The guilt was written all over his face. They both knew that things would never be the same again. Joshua stopped in front of the barn, the place where everything had started. The old wood creaked as the wind passed through the cracks. He thought about what Samuel had said. The Vanguard, the blood bond, the secret deal their grandfather had made. It was hard to believe, but as much as Joshua wanted to deny it, he knew it was true. The journal was evidence of that. "I've been thinking," Samuel's voice interrupted his thoughts. He had approached quietly, his footsteps soft on the dirt. Joshua turned to face his brother. "About what?" "The Vanguard," Samuel said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "If they've been watching us all this time, if they know we've discovered the truth, then they've probably already made their move." "What do you mean?" "They're not just going to come here and ask for the land," Samuel explained, his tone growing more serious. "They'll want more. They'll want us to honor the deal, and they'll expect us to give up everything. They won't stop until they have what they came for." A cold shiver ran down Joshua's spine. The more Samuel spoke, the more real the threat became. The Vanguard was no small group. They had power, influence, and connections that reached far beyond the ranch. If they wanted something, they would stop at nothing to get it. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come," Joshua said, his voice filled with determination. "We have to act." "I know," Samuel replied, his eyes darkening. "But what can we do? We're just two men against a powerful organization. They've had control over this land for generations, and we've been living in their shadow all this time." Joshua's heart raced as he thought about their options. It was clear they couldn't keep hiding from the truth. The only way forward was to confront it head on. But how? What kind of power could they have against an organization that had been operating in the shadows for so long? "We can't fight them alone," Joshua said, his mind working quickly. "We need help." "Who would help us?" Samuel asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "No one even knows the truth. And if we try to tell anyone, they'll think we're crazy. The Vanguard is a secret. No one talks about them." Joshua clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. "We'll find someone. We have to. We can't just give up. This land is ours, Samuel. And I'll fight for it, no matter what." Samuel sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I don't want to lose the ranch, Joshua. I don't want to lose everything we've worked for. But I don't know what to do. I've been carrying this secret for so long, and now it's all coming out. I'm scared." "I'm scared too," Joshua admitted, his voice softer now. "But we can't let fear control us. If we give up now, the Vanguard wins. We can't let that happen." They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of their situation settling over them. There was no going back now. The truth was out, and they had no choice but to face the consequences. The following days were tense. Joshua and Samuel knew they had to take action, but they didn't know where to start. They couldn't fight the Vanguard alone, and their options were limited. But there was one person Joshua trusted above all others, someone who might be able to help. That person was Caroline Hayes, a former law woman who had left the sheriff's office years ago after a tragic incident. She had a reputation for being tough and unyielding, and her skills were unmatched when it came to tracking down dangerous people. Joshua had known her since they were both children, and despite her being somewhat of a recluse these days, he knew she was the one person who might be able to offer them the help they needed. Joshua had heard rumors that Caroline had been looking into the Vanguard, or at least some of the people connected to them. He didn't know the full story, but he trusted her judgment. If anyone could help them take on the organization, it was Caroline. He made the decision quickly. The next morning, he and Samuel set out to find her. The ride was long, and the weather was growing warmer as they approached the small cabin on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, just a small, modest home with a few acres of land. But it was where Caroline had chosen to live in isolation, away from the hustle and bustle of the world. When they arrived, Joshua knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. The door creaked open, and there she was, Caroline Hayes, older than he remembered, but still with the same steely eyes and sharp features. Her hair was tied back in a no-nonsense bun, and she looked every bit the part of a woman who had seen the darker side of the world. "Joshua Bennett," Caroline said, her voice low and guarded. "What brings you here?" "We need your help," Joshua said, his voice steady but urgent. "It's about the Vanguard." Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly at the mention of the name, but she didn't speak.
Instead, she stepped aside, allowing them into the cabin.
Once inside, Joshua quickly explained everything. What they had learned, the journal, the deal their grandfather had made, and the danger they were now facing. Caroline listened intently, her face expressionless as she absorbed the information. "So, the Vanguard is real," Caroline said finally, her voice a mix of disbelief and concern. "I've heard whispers about them, but I didn't think they were involved in something like this."
"They're dangerous, Joshua."
"You're not just dealing with a group of landowners. These people are involved in things that could destroy you." "We know," Samuel replied, his voice low. "That's why we need your help. We can't take them on by ourselves." Caroline didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to a small cabinet and pulled out a worn map of the region. She spread it out on the table, her fingers tracing the lines of the land. "You're right," she said after a moment. "The Vanguard has power. But they also have weaknesses. I've been keeping an eye on some of their associates. I know where they operate, and I know some of their leaders. It's not much, but it's a start." Joshua felt a glimmer of hope rise in his chest. They might just have a chance after all. As the days passed, Joshua, Samuel, and Caroline worked together to devise a plan. They gathered information, made connections, and began to piece together the network of the Vanguard. It wasn't easy, and the danger was always looming, but they were determined. The ranch was their home, and they wouldn't let it go without a fight. Joshua knew it wasn't going to be easy, but with Caroline's help, he felt like they had a fighting chance. The Vanguard had underestimated them, and that was a mistake they would soon regret. As the sun set behind the hills, Joshua looked out across the land. The ranch, the land that had been passed down through generations, was still theirs, for now. But he knew that the real battle was just beginning. They had uncovered the truth. Now it was time to face the consequences. The days were long, filled with planning and action. Joshua, Samuel, and Caroline spent every waking moment preparing for what lay ahead. They had no time to waste, and each hour that passed felt like a ticking clock, a countdown to a confrontation they were all dreading. The vanguard was a powerful force, and it was only a matter of time before they came knocking. But Joshua wasn't ready to surrender. He couldn't, not when so much was at stake. It had been a week since they'd met Caroline at her cabin, and their efforts to gather information had begun to show promise. Caroline had proven to be a valuable ally. With her experience, she was able to track down some key members of the vanguard and map out their operations. Together, they began to strategize, determining their next move. Joshua stood on the porch of the ranch house one evening, the warm sunset casting an orange glow over the fields. The air was still, with only the rustling of leaves breaking the silence. The weight of the situation rested heavily on his shoulders. The ranch, his family's legacy, was in jeopardy, but he wasn't going to let it slip away without a fight. Samuel walked up behind him, his steps slow and deliberate. "We're as ready as we're going to be," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Caroline's been a big help, but we still don't know everything we need to." "I know," Joshua replied, turning to face his brother. "But we can't wait forever. The vanguard's not going to sit back and let us figure this out. They'll strike first, and we have to be prepared." Samuel nodded, but his expression was filled with doubt. "Are we really ready for this?" "We've never fought an enemy like them before. They have power, connections, and they're not afraid to use them." "I don't know if we're ready," Joshua admitted, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But we have to be. This ranch is our home. It's been in our family for generations, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take it from us." That night, after a long day of planning, they gathered in the barn. The lanterns were lit, casting a soft glow on the worn wooden beams. Caroline stood near the table, a stack of papers and maps laid out in front of her. Her eyes were focused, scanning the information she had gathered. She looked up as Joshua and Samuel entered, her face hard with determination. "We've made progress," she said, her voice strong. "I've located their headquarters. It's a place called Redstone Ridge. It's not far from here, just north of the canyon. From what I've gathered, it's where they've been operating out of for years. They have armed guards, security, everything." Joshua took a deep breath. "We'll need to get in there, gather whatever information we can, and make sure they know we're not backing down." Caroline nodded. "I've arranged a meeting with someone who works for the Vanguard. He's a contact of mine, someone I trust. He might be able to give us more details about their plans. If we play this right, we can get what we need without drawing too much attention." Samuel looked uneasy. "A meeting? With someone from the Vanguard? How can we trust him?" "I know it's risky, but it's the only chance we have. He's been against the Vanguard for years, but he's too afraid to go public. He might not be much, but he can give us the information we need to take them down." Joshua stepped forward, his mind made up. "It's a risk we have to take. We don't have a choice." The following evening, they made their way to the agreed meeting spot. It was an old, abandoned cabin at the edge of the woods, far from the prying eyes of the town. The sun had set, and the darkness wrapped around them like a blanket. As they approached the cabin, Joshua's nerves began to rise. What if this man was playing them? What if this was just another trap? But they had no choice. If the Vanguard was going to come for them, they needed to be ready. Caroline led the way, her hand resting on the hilt of her gun. She had always been a woman of action, and Joshua admired that about her. They reached the cabin's door, and Caroline knocked twice, slow and deliberate. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing a man dressed in dark clothes. His face was shadowed, but Joshua could tell by the way he held himself that he was no stranger to danger. "You, Joshua Bennett?" the man asked, his voice gravelly. "That's me," Joshua replied, his tone cautious but firm. The man stepped aside, allowing them to enter. Inside, the cabin was dark and sparsely furnished, the air thick with dust. The man closed the door behind them, locking it with a heavy click. "I'm Caleb," he said, motioning to a chair near the table. "Sit down." "We don't have much time." As they all took their seats, Caleb leaned forward. "I've been keeping an eye on the Vanguard for years. They don't just control land, they control people. They've made deals with powerful men across the country, and now they've got their sights set on you." Joshua's heart tightened. "What do you mean?" "They want your land, your ranch," Caleb said, his eyes dark with understanding. "Your grandfather's deal didn't just bind your family to them, it made you a target. They won't stop until they have everything. And when they come, they'll come hard." "Then we need to be ready," Joshua said, his voice full of resolve. Caleb hesitated for a moment, then nodded. You're right. But they won't be easy to take down. They've got connections, allies who will fight for them. You'll need more than just guns and courage. You'll need a plan. Joshua glanced at Samuel and Caroline, their expressions grim but determined. We'll do whatever it takes. But we can't wait any longer. Caleb stood up, walking over to the window and peering out into the darkness. I'll help you, he said after a long pause. I'll provide the intel you need. But you'll have to move quickly. The vanguard won't wait forever. The next few days were filled with action. Caleb provided them with everything he knew about the vanguard's operations, their strongholds and their weaknesses. Joshua and Caroline worked together to come up with a plan to take them down, while Samuel kept the ranch in order, making sure they wouldn't be caught off guard. The night before the confrontation, Joshua stood alone in the field, staring up at the stars. The weight of what they were about to do settled on his shoulders. This wasn't just a fight for the ranch. It was a fight for his family's future, for everything they had worked for. And Joshua wasn't about to back down. As he walked back to the house, he saw Samuel standing in the doorway waiting for him. You ready for this? Samuel asked. Joshua didn't hesitate. I have to be. The fight for their future had begun, and there was no turning back.